What's up, MOMnation, and welcome back to another episode in another year. Oh my goodness, Candie, you are our very first guest in 2025 for our Live and Learn. Yay! Candie,
I feel so honored.
Welcome, Candie, and welcome everybody else. Happy 2025 to you. I am super excited to jump into this because, guys, I don't know if you know my story, but last year, my beloved pet, my Layla, my German Shepherd, passed away. She was 12, and we ended up getting a puppy, and a very different puppy, a very different breed, and he was a brat. So enter Candie into my life. She came when he was at his absolute brattiest. So Candie is a dog trainer. She also has an amazing podcast called Corgi Town USA, and she is here to talk with us a bit about companion training for your pup.
Yes, hi. Thanks for having me. I feel so honored to be your first guest of the year.
I know, it's so cool.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Just for those, and thank you, for those who maybe aren't familiar with who you are, what you do, can you give us a little snippet?
Absolutely. So I'm Candie of Corgi Town USA. I've had corgis for 20 years. I've had 9 over 20 years, not all at once. 4 seems to be my limit that I can manage myself since we travel a lot. But I started dog training because I found that I can talk to animals really well, and I pick up on their signals very well. And I thought this would be great for me to help guide people. And so I've been doing that for a few years now, and just happy to have the podcast. It's corgi centric. And of course, we go to a lot of corgi events. My dogs are very social, but it's really, the podcast is for pet parents. We call them parents in general, to kind of help the pet parent, because there are a lot of special interest groups as far as if you're showing dogs or if they're breeding dogs. Those are very different things. Working dogs, show dogs, and pets are all kind of considered different things. So I'm here to help the pet parent specifically.
Well, thank you for helping this pet parent, because our cute little ball of fluff was making us crazy. My goodness. And when you first came, let's just dive into that, if you don't mind, real quick, because I think it'd be kind of a good intro to what you're going to talk about next. But there's a big, huge difference in dog training that I did not understand until I met you. So I had the German Shepherd. I actually got her trained for protection and obedience, like all the things. But it was a very different process than when you came over my house, and it was like, we were just kind of, we were doing things, but we were just kind of partying a little bit. And so oddly, like, blew my mind. He did pick up on that. He did begin to get better. He did start listening to me, because it was like non-existent before. But that blew my mind, because it was a very different approach than what I was used to with my big dog.
Yeah, absolutely. So you worked with a trainer who trained working dogs before. Yeah. So there is a stark difference. I won't say stark as far as training. I'll start by saying obedience training, which is my strength. Obedience training is helping you to communicate better with your animal, so that you and your pet actually understand each other's signals. They pick up on predictable patterns. You and I've talked about this before. So it's our job as guardians to kind of create that space for them, give them some guidance and structure. Some dogs are more working dogs than others. Some most like having a job. There are some that really don't want a job, but most do better with having a job. And yours is what I prefer to call sassy.
Yeah. With the capital S.
Just a little sassy. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that means that there's a lot of personality in that little body, and a lot of love too. So as an obedience trainer, I'm fear-free. So I don't use any of the methods that could be considered aversive. I won't mention specific names, but there are a few very famous trainers that use some of what we would call old school methods that are kind of teeter on dominance, like dominance, submissive. And a lot of that's been debunked with science over the years. So in the training community, we've kind of learned that positive reinforcement, you get a lot farther with it, and it better helps with your bond with your animal. Now, there are some trainers that are balanced trainers, which means they use a little bit of both. They'll use the positive reinforcement mostly, and then they'll also use some methods that are controversial, things like bark collars and Yeah, things like that. I don't typically use any of that, but some of your balance trainers, when it comes to things like working dogs, dogs for protection, that is going to look differently because the communication with your companion is going to be different than with your working dog that has a job.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to speak ill of any trainers that use other methods. I just know what I stick to and what works for me. And that's using positive reinforcement methods. So everything we ask your dog to do has to be worth it to your dog, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we try to find out what motivates. And so it's not always cookie pushing, as we'll talk to. Sometimes it's play, sometimes it's affection, sometimes it's simple attention, sometimes it's simple validation from having the marker word, which is the yes. That's what I asked for. It just depends on what motivates your dog. So my job as a trainer is to come in, help you communicate with your pet better on what motivates your little guy, your little girl. What do they prefer? What makes life most fulfilling to them? Let's tap into that.
And what types of cues or what are you looking for that gives you that idea? Like what indications are there? Because you probably weren't even through the door 5 minutes and you were like, oh, he's food motivated.
Yeah. Well, I carry cookies. So normally they're all over me. I'm like, we like the food. Good. A food motivated dog is a highly trainable dog most of the time because that's a very easy transaction to say, I'm going to ask you for something. Here is your reward. And then we have that symbiotic relationship. But dogs are energy animals. So they work off of energies very well. And anyone listening or watching probably has noticed in their pet that if they tend to be a little edgy themselves, nervous, stressed, have a lot of things going on, you'll notice some differences in your pets. If you really tap into it, they're probably a little nervous too, or a little stressed, maybe a little off. They're very tapped into our energy as guardians. So body language is a big communicator for dogs. So I look for body language. If they're ears up, attention, okay, we're ready to work. We're curious. We're very interested in what's happening now. If we tend to be a little low, our body's tight, maybe the ears are back. Tail may or may not be wagging. A wagging tail doesn't always necessarily mean a happy dog.
Right.
But we pay attention to the body language. And that tells me a lot about the state of the dog because occasionally I'll meet some that are so terrified of me and everyone else. We have a lot of work to do. And that's a behavior modification, which is different from basic obedience training, where we kind of have to dial back all the way several steps.
So there's a lot of assessment that you're doing when you come over that, I mean, I know we had a lot of conversation. You're extremely communicative, which I appreciated, but it sounds like there's some assessment happening kind of behind the scenes between the ears of Candie that we're not necessarily seeing.
Well, I have a lot of practice in it, right? I do it all the time. So yeah, that's a big part of it. If we are, as trainers, I'm going to say collective we, the royal we, as trainers, if we're not able to look and communicate with your pet and assess their state of mind, we're going to have a harder time getting through to them, right? Yeah. So we really need to be paying attention to the nuances of that dog, how they are in their environment, how they are in different environments. It's not always parent assessment, because a parent assessment might be different from a trainer assessment. For instance, you'll hear a lot, oh, the dog got mad at me. I left, they chewed my shoes up. And I know they felt bad because they were guilty when I got home. Okay, I can see where that can make sense to someone, but as a trainer, that's not actually how dogs generalize. They don't logic the same way we do.
Right.
So what more likely happened is your dog chewed your shoes because they were very anxious, because it's not a predictable pattern when you're not around. Right. There are sounds, noises, different smells, different things. Even barometric pressure in the environment can affect your dog.
Wow.
And if you're not there to guide them on how they should be acting, oh gosh, I've got all this nervous energy. What am I going to do? Oh, this feels really good to chew on, this rubber, this leather. Oh, this is soothing to me. And then when the owner gets home, owner's mad. How dare you chew those shoes? Those were very expensive. The dog's going to run and hide and put their ears down and communicate that, okay, this is scary. They're not necessarily saying I'm guilty for doing this. They're more saying, I know you're mad. I don't know why, but I'm scared. So I'm going to communicate that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think oftentimes, and I think we do this with kids too, right? Like oftentimes we think that they're as mature in their thinking as we are. Maybe mature isn't the right word, but as advanced, right? And so
Yeah.
I personally don't believe that a dog ever gets revenge against their human. Am I right?
Yeah, that's a human logic.
Right. Right. So they're not, like you said, they're not going to go chew the shoes because they're like, well, she left me again. I'm just gonna these must be her favorite. I'll just chew these up.
Right. It just happens to be bad luck if they
Hmm.
chew the favorite.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a couple of things that I want to go in two different directions, and obviously I have to choose one. So the first direction is when we talked about, or when I hear other people talk about a dog needs a job. If they're high energy, they need something to do, they need some mental stimulation. Can you give some examples of what those things are? Because before you and I got together, I was clueless. When someone would say that, I'm like, what kind of job? What do you mean?
You mean he has to have a work hat and a briefcase? Okay,
Yeah,
I guess
right.
we'll
Like,
do
is
the
this 9 to 5? I don't know.
Yeah, well, he wants his weekends off and a full benefits package. Yeah, so having a job is essentially a directive. So when we think about, again, working dogs are different than pets. Working dogs, it's a very specific type of training. It's going to be different. But speaking on pets specifically, since that's my specialty, having a job means a directive. So going back to the predictable patterns, the big thing is keeping your dog below threshold. And what I mean by threshold, for those who don't understand, when you have that nervousness and that's tight body, panting, maybe even as far as showing teeth, growling, that means your dog's uncomfortable. Most people know that, but there are also more subtle signals that we can learn to pay attention to. But you have a threshold. And so what I call is like a crescendo, where, okay, body is a little tight or breathing's a little labored, heart rate goes up, not sure about the situation, eyes may get a little big, and then maybe something triggers your dog and now they're not even listening to you, or you can't get through to them. And if you think from the human side, that's if someone asks you to do something and they're nice about it, you might say, okay, let me consider that, versus if someone threatens you with a weapon. You're going to be a little nervous and probably not, wait, what do I have to do? If you think of it in those terms, it helps you be more compassionate towards your dog and how you're communicating. But as much as we can keep them below threshold, the more successful we will be. Did I answer your question? I think I took a
Yeah,
long
yeah. And
Okay.
do you have an example of that? Like, for example, what jobs do you give
the
your
work.
dogs to stay under threshold?
Yeah, sure. So the works, thank you. The predictable patterns, if we give them a job. So I talk about things that are soothing and fulfilling to your animal. So chew toys most dogs enjoy something to chew on. It's sort of like an OCD mechanism. Like, I feel the need to chew. As humans, we might like to chew gum, smoking, that type of thing, depending upon what your vice is. The dog that soothes them typically to have something to do. So that's engagement and enrichment. So there's lots of different things on the market you can do. Kong makes a variety of products that are wonderful. You can fill it with their filler, or you can fill them with peanut butter or whipped cream or something that's dog safe. If you freeze those, you get a lot more mileage out of them because it'll
Great
take them
idea.
longer. Yeah, so lick mats are a great option. It also helps with grooming and things too, because the dog's going to focus on, oh, this is very fulfilling to lick, and also I want to get everything out of every little nook and cranny. So that's more of an engagement type of job. But as far as giving a job, you can create patterns with your dog that's also very fulfilling to them. And what I mean by that is, when we go to the front door to answer the door to see people who are coming over, many people have the problem of their dog getting too excited when they have visitors, even if it's the mail carrier or somebody who's going to come visit us for dinner or drink. Their dog gets excited, they jump, they bark. Barking's kind of natural to a dog, but we can create some predictable patterns as far as a place cue. Okay, your job when someone comes to the door is to go to your place and wait. So of course we have to go back where there is less stimuli to practice that. So when we're comfortable at home, No one's coming over. We're going to practice. Go to your place. Okay, now go into a down, wait and settle until I've released you. And your job is every time somebody comes to that door, you go to your place and you wait. And then when I release you, you get to say hi to your friends. And when we go on our walks, you're to sit and you're to look at me as I leash you up and wait for your next cue to go. Those are some examples of giving your dog a job so that they create a pattern of not only helps you as the parent to have this nice, relaxed approach to different things that could be very stimulating, is very stimulating to your dog, but also they have a job. Oh, the leash is out. I know what I need to do. I go to this place, I sit, I wait, and I look at mom, I look at dad until we get the leash up and then we go. Does that make sense?
Yes. Oh, I love that. Awesome.
Yeah.
So my
Fun
next
for everybody.
correction, what's that?
Fun for everybody.
Yeah. No, I love that place thing. That is awesome. Anyway, we've had progress. So thank you for your help in that. My little guy,
Good.
he's still a tiny bit crazy, but he's also only a year old. You know his story. So
Yeah, puppy still.
he sure is. So speaking of puppies, what do you find is the top 2 or top 3 issues that people continue to have over and over that you continually work with people on?
Sure. So a lot of it is threshold issues. So your dog gets up to threshold, they get so stimulated that they can't focus on anything you're saying. And that's kind of across the board. So if we're saying top 3, I would say it all has to do with threshold. So for instance, people coming to the door. Many times when we have puppies, everybody wants to see the puppy. You have a new puppy? That's so exciting. They're so cute. I can't wait to come over and rub their belly and give them lots of snacks because they're precious. So what happens is unknowingly, we create this pattern of people coming over, and every time somebody comes through that door, the dog says, oh my gosh, I'm going to get belly rubs and I'm going to get treats and I'm going to get attention and it's all going to be about me and this is so awesome. And they get so excited that they kind of spin out. And then we have jumping, barking, sometimes nipping, right? So that's a big one. Yeah. Yep. Sometimes that too. So again, we're already at threshold. We've had the crescendo. They get up to a certain point. We're like, I told you to sit. Why won't you sit? Well, at this point, they're so above threshold, they're not going to listen. So when it comes to nervousness, excitement, those are the same, even aggression, which dogs I won't say are angry. That's kind of, I hate to say the word angry, but what we perceive as angry. So showing teeth, gnashing, snarling, biting. That's more of a fear response, but that's all the same physiological response in a dog. It is for humans too, but we recognize our emotions more. If we get really excited, we can usually know pretty well, are we excited? Are we nervous? Are we scared? Are we upset? With the dog, they don't always know what the emotion is, but they have the same physiological response. So that's why you get some of these, what I'll call unwanted behaviors. Well, every time somebody comes over, they jump and they nip and they pull at shirts and I can't get them to listen. Well, we've created this pattern that it is cash and prizes anytime somebody comes to the door. And then sometimes we get nervous. If it's somebody we don't know, why is somebody knocking at the door? We're in the age of texting and calling first or emailing or whatever.
Right.
When I was a kid, you didn't have that, right? People would just show up and date myself.
Exactly. It was very normal.
Yeah, people would just show up. That's less of a thing now. But if somebody comes to the door and we don't expect them, we can get nervous or maybe even say loudly, who in the world is here? Your dog's going to pick up on that. Oh, should we be on alert? I'm ready. I've got this, mom. I've got this, dad. Right? So that's a big one, is when people come over. Door darting is also a common one that I tackle. That is when you open the door and you're afraid of your dog running out, which is a very concerning safety issue. The 2 ways I address that is, one, we start by getting your dog to focus on you. And we start slowly, not very much stimuli. And when we're at home, quiet evening, we practice having a good focus cue. And if they're food motivated, very easy to do. Hey, guess who has the chicken nugget? You're very interesting when you have the chicken nugget, right?
Yes.
So we start there and then we build up to different types of stimuli. So then we'll add in a few, see how we're doing reliably. If we're doing well, we'll start to add in a few. If we're not, we'll dial back and keep practicing. That's how we build reliability. But as much as they can focus on you, that's pretty much step one in the training, is them learning to focus on you, to follow your cues no matter the situation. It also gives them a little bit of confidence because they learn, hey, mom, dad, ask for this thing. I can pipe into them and they're going to guide me on what I should do next. And then it kind of helps them also sort of fight that threshold. Okay, I'm getting nervous, but if I sit here and look at mom or dad, they're going to tell me what to do and I'm going to get rewarded. And so the other way we do that is we practice a good wait cue. So wait until I've released you. We work on that same way. We start in low stimulus times and we work on what wait means until you've been released. And then we start to add in different types of stimulus. And if we get to a public place where we can practice a good wait, then you can feel pretty good about your door darting situation. I don't typically practice at a front door because there's so much stimuli on the other end of that.
Yeah.
We want our dog to be successful.
Yeah.
But once we have a nice, reliable one, that gives you some confidence to, if the door does get swung open, maybe you're having a delivery, some furniture or something, you can say, wait. And they should be able to wait. And it also helps with impulse control. They didn't just smell or hear something and then out they go. Oh, wait, but mom, dad says I have to wait. I have to look at them. I have to wait and see what they do. So that's usually the way that I combat that. Door darting is a really big one. And the other is just poor leash manners. I would say those are the top three. So just safe, calm greetings, what I'll call calm greetings, leash manners, and door darting.
Yeah, those are, I definitely hear a lot of conversation about those for sure. And it's nice to know that you can help with that. It sounds like, and I'm assuming that my experience is somewhat similar to everybody else's, but it sounds like this type of stuff takes time. It takes time and work.
Practice.
Yeah,
it takes practice and time. So I'll talk about a little bit real quickly, if I may.
Please.
What behavior modification is versus basic obedience training. So when we talk about basic obedience training, sit, look, nose touch to the hand, those types of things, those are some of the basic cues I usually start with, which is pretty common amongst most training programs. Those are just simple, hey, I told you a cue, I've marked it with a verbal cue, yes, or clicker. The dog starts to learn, okay, I know what this cue means and I can do that no matter what. Those typically, most dogs will pick that up pretty quickly. You practice 10 to 15 minutes a day. It's pretty low commitment. As long as you're practicing, your dog usually learns it pretty quickly. When we talk about behavior modification, that's a different conversation. And what I mean by that is modifying an unwanted behavior, such as not greeting strangers with good manners when they come to the door, or friends. We have to modify that behavior to a calm interaction. I either go to my place or I walk to the door and I sit and I wait for you to address me versus running and jumping at the person. So when we've created a behavior that we're not crazy about, or maybe the dog has somehow developed a behavior, we want to modify that to a better, I want to say more desired behavior. I'm real careful about using good, bad, better, best. It's more desired versus non-desired, because the more compassion we have for our dogs, the better we communicate with them. And they're not doing anything specifically to annoy you. They're just acting out of instinct.
Yeah.
So that's why I use those words carefully. But to modify a behavior, we have to start sort of backtrack a little bit. And typically when we're at threshold, it's the same physiological response, nervousness or excitement. So if you consider how a human would address a fear they have, maybe we're afraid of heights, so we'll expose ourselves to that fear and we'll just go stand on that tall building and try to deal with that, and then come back and keep doing it till it gets easier. Dogs don't necessarily work that way. If you try to force the dog into a situation where they're afraid, you're going to traumatize them and make it worse.
Yeah.
So we have to go all the way back. Where do we start to become a threshold? For instance, if it's maybe walking out the door on walks, we get towards threshold because once we get out that door, they do fine, but then we get past our threshold of the home and my dog's jumping and lunging and running all over and I can't recall them, all these types of things. Okay, where does that start? Often people think it's when you cross the threshold of your home. Not necessarily. Most of the time it's going to start before that. That's why the trainer can help you kind of assess. Their body is going to change. Their heart rate's going to go up. They're going to start panting a little bit. Oh, they have the leash out. Oh, they have the leash out. I'm ready for this. I'm ready for this. And then it's once they get past the door, we're all the way up at threshold, which is why we're not listening. So That's to modify that behavior. We have to go all the way back. Where does the nervousness start? Is it when the leash comes out? Okay, well then let's create a new pattern where we get the leash out, we put it calmly on the ground, and we just sit with our dog for a moment. We give them a couple cookies. Okay, good boy. So long as they're sitting and being calm. And then we put the leash back and don't say anything about it, walk away. It's going to confuse your dog because they're like, wait, that's not the pattern. They're going to pay attention to you a little bit more because you've kind of disrupted the process. But if we continue to do that, okay, now we can get the leash down after maybe a few days or a week of doing that, and we don't have a response. It's just, okay, they're doing this again. Perfect. Now we can actually leash up. How are we doing? Are we still calm? Okay, well, then we can proceed to the front door. If we're not, then we're going to leash them up, repeat the process, but only go that far.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that sequence.
Yeah, it's deconstructing, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You've shared so much, and usually I don't keep my live and learn guests this long.
Sorry,
but
chatty Candie.
No, it's great. It's perfect. It's such great information, and I appreciate it. I'd love to have you back on the show, maybe to speak a little bit deeper into that. Maybe we could go into puppy basics, puppy training, that kind of thing, if you would like to have us. But before we go, is there anything else that you'd like to add or like to say that you haven't had a chance to?
Sure. So getting dogs, thank you for that. Getting dogs in general, when you're looking for a companion, part of what our show at Corgi Town USA is kind of guiding people on the right place to get them. Always very pro-adoption. If you want to get a puppy, no shame as well. I've had both breeder purchase and rescues. I ask that you first research your breed very well and look at local breed clubs. So, I mean, I'm good at the corgis. If you have questions, corgis, reach out to me. Always happy to answer. But any type of breed specific, start with the breed clubs and then research that. Now, if you go to rescue a month, that's different. But then you have your 3 days, 3 months. 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. Those are different states of socialization where your dog starts to get comfortable in routine, get comfortable with you and your family. So I'd ask people to keep in mind those two things as you're looking at getting more new companions for your family.
That's huge. So thank you for sharing that information, because I feel like more often than not, I'm having a conversation with somebody who gets a new puppy. Now they're a year old or whatever, and they didn't realize that the breed was so active or that the breed was heat intolerant here in Arizona. You know what I mean? Not that our dogs should stay outside in the summer, but let's face it, they got to go out. They got to go potty. They got to do things outside. You know, sometimes we train outside when the sun's down, right? So having a heat intolerant dog is definitely something that you need to be aware of. Things like that. And I find that it's kind of after the fact that they're like, ooh, we didn't realize that this is what our breed needs, or this is what our breed is prone to, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. 100%. And there's unfortunately a lot of poor breeding practices out there too. So we try to guide people on the questions to ask your breeder. They can seem like a reputable breeder that does a good job. They can hide it. So again, breed clubs are a great place to start. If you're looking at corgis, I'm always happy to help, but looking at breed clubs will help you to know temperament breeding is very important. So a reputable breeder, I apologize for the barking.
Reputable breeder. It's super relevant.
Yeah, that's our show. Corgi Town, where the corgis run the town. But yeah, so a good breeder will also breed for temperament as well. And will also guide the new puppy buyer home on, did you know this about Frenchies? Did you know this about Westies? Did you know this about et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So those things are all good to be considered.
Yeah, I think that is such giant advice, Candie. Thank you. And thank you so much for spending a bit of time with us. It was so informative. I need to go back and watch the replay several times, even though I've already hired you. I've already had
Always happy to help. Always happy to help.
Oh, you're amazing. And I do have your contact info here in the show notes, but just for those that may be listening on the podcast, the platform of their choice, can you share what your contact info is and the best way to reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's Candie, Candie, at corgitownusa.com. That's my email address. But you can also reach us on pretty much any of the socials. It's Corgi Town USA, CORGI. And then Instagram, I think, is underscores. So Corgi_Town_USA. We're very active on Instagram. So if you message us through there, I'm pretty quick to get back.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Candie. It was an absolute pleasure having you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for the time.
You are so welcome. All right, guys, hop on over to our YouTube channel. It is at MOMnation USA. That's our handle. You can check out the years and years and years worth of live and learns that we have done. We are here to help share specialized knowledge, specialized skills from our group. So from the entrepreneurs in our group, from the dog trainers in our group, from the podcast people in our group, we are constantly pulling from MOMnation, from their expertise to teach you. And that's what the Live and Learn is all about. If you prefer to listen to the podcast style on your favorite podcast platform, do a quick search for MOMnation Talk Radio. And there you'll find us. Like, follow, notify, all the things. You'll never miss an episode. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much again.